Waitin, Nellie by J. Marshall Mather. It was a bleak morning in March. An east wind, wild with its career over miles of moorland, hissed and howled through the village, sweeping into eddies and spirals the dust and dirt of the street. A lowering sky hurried along before the driving couriers of the gale, and stray flakes of snow, after gyrating and chasing each other over the straggling roofs, died in blots of moisture on the pavement below, where the wayfarer bent his head before the fury of the storm. Nor could the vapour from the knotted stacks of chimneys rise. It fell, too, like the snow. Cottage doors, used to be open all day long, were shut, their dwellers cowering over well-fed fires, and looking now and again through the rattling windows, and muttering to themselves that it was a weary day. And for once the name of the weather was not taken in vain. It was indeed a day of depression, a day that wrought a nameless melancholy on the sensitive mind. A factory village in the summertide is far removed from Eden, its narrow streets ever in shadow, its grey walls cruel in monotony, its square mills with their crash of cruel labour and their belching sentinels of smoke. These respond not to the transforming touch of the God of Light in his longest diurnal rounds, but in the days of driving wind, of long black frost, of pall of sombre cloud, well, we can only pray on behalf of those who live beneath them for the pity of an infinite God. It was on such a day as this that I first saw the child, whose sad story was to be shortly narrated to me by old Harry. She was standing beneath the shadow of the lodge gate, the dark dormitory of labour, from which at loosing hours poured the freed operatives of the mill. The sharp angles of her lean shoulders showed beneath the folds of her threadbare shawl, and her skirts were drawn about her with the boisterous wind. Her face was pale and drawn, yet animated with a look of expectation, as though a light of hope were kindled in the childish eyes. Those who passed to and fro paid her little heed. She seemed no more to them than the door through which they went in and out, or the great stones which built up its jars. Yet she eyed them with a hungry look, glancing up in their faces and questioning them. Was she begging? I wondered, and pitying a dog called to shiver in such a blast and cower in such a storm, my heart went out towards the little one, and I offered her a coin, and bade her home, if such she had, to seek its shelter and its warmth. No hand, however, did she extend to my proffered gift, and I soon found from her broken speech it was not money she sought, but mother. And does she work in there? I asked, pointing to the mill, and then the little hungry face was turned on me, and I saw not hunger only, but vacancy, the vacancy that bespeaks an unhinged mind. Yet the heart was there, burning with its fervid passion, kindling with the fires of love. As I again questioned her, bending over her with more than a curious interest, her head, all white with cotton-fly, was thrust out of the second story of the factory window, and above the roar of the machinery a voice cried, "Who's knowin' reet, poor lass, you mak naught on her." Nor was I surprised to be confirmed in my judgment of the child's insanity. So, forcing the shilling into her hand, I left the child where I had found her, alone under the shadow of the gloomy mill. About 10 days afterwards I again passed the lodge gates. The frost was broken, but the east wind still held its relentless sway, hurling down showers of chilling rain. Pedestrians were few, the village was deserted. Occasionally a loud-voiced woman would shout across the street to her neighbour, or noisily placed an empty bucket under some spout, relieving the overburdened roofs of their watery deluge. Only those were out upon whose shoulder compulsion had laid its hand. Judge then of my surprise when I saw on the same spot, and in the same garb, the same child whom I had seen there in my previous round. There she stood, her eyes fixed on the gloomy gates, keenly alive to all who came therefrom, expectant, hopeful, yet ever to be clouded by the disappointment that comes from the unfulfilment of long desire. I had not forgotten her, but engagements had driven her from my nearer memory. Now, however, the sight of her a second time whetted all my curiosity, and daring the fury of the storm, I again sought to draw from her the secret of her weary waiting. "How is it you are out in this rain?" I asked. "You are wet through." And laying my hand upon her shoulder, the gathering moisture of the shawl that oozed beneath my touch told of the girl's drenched condition. Looking up into my face with the same mute hope in her eye that before arrested me, she uttered the cry, "Mother!" and pointed to the mill. A woman standing in the lodge gates, and who overheard us, said, "Her mother's been dead these 2 years, but like as who willn't believe it, will to Nellie," to which the child shook her head. Just then old Harry crossed the factory yard, and seeing my perplexity, beckoned me to follow him. "What?" I said, "and leave this child out here in the rain?" "You can do naught wi' her," he replied. "Lots has tried their hand as well as you, but who stops on as you see, and who will do until who dees?" Seeing that further parley was useless, I followed the old man into the close atmosphere of the engine-house, glad of the change to a warmer temperature, yet sorrowful for the child whom I had left in the storm. At first he was too busy to satisfy the curiosity that shared the pity of my heart, so I sat and mused and dreamt of the waiting waif by the factory door, wondering what sorrow had portioned out her burden, or mixed the ingredients of her bitter cup. Harry the while dodging amid his maze of wheels and network of cranks, lubricating, sweating, or swearing, as the case might be, yet all the while deftly defying the movements of what seemed to be an all-devouring monster. Humanity amid a web of steel, the skill of man against the speed and revolution of piston, spur, and beam. I was suddenly aroused from my reverie by the touch of the engineer's greasy palm upon my shoulder. "It's dinner hour," he said, "and I can find you a bit of time. You're full of yon lass." And he pointed through the doorway to the child who was still standing in the driving rain. "It's a sad tale, I can tell you, but then, what tale isn't, if you hear it to th' end? There's a deal of mixing in life's cup, sweet and bitter, better and wur, as they say. Leastways, I've fun it so. And there's much muchness among all us, rich and poor, wise uns and foolish uns. We've all to go through the mill, but you're fain to know about little lass, aren't you?" "Yes," I said, "she has a warm place in my heart, and I confess I am curious to know her history. To see her standing yonder in all weathers, looking up at the black wall of the mill, and welcomed by no other sound than the roar of the machinery, is to me unaccountable. Surely she's someone's child, for even when our fathers and mothers forsake us, there's parish shelter and parish dole. Hear my story, and then you'll know. Who were born a decent stock, but come into the world with a shadow o'er her mind. What the cause on it, I don't know. There is as says it were her feyther's death, for he was snuffed out with fever 6 months afore who were born. On he rode little and was short-witted, I mean, and it weren't long afore folks said who'd never fend for herself. But the lass had a good mother, and geeked out more love for being short her wit nor other childer. like as though meat he has his own way of squiring and sattling in the long run. He leaves nobody a loser. But I were telling you, who'd a good mother, and the child stuck as close to her as who did to the child. As soon as little and get out enough, it used to run by her side to the factory, waiting at lodge gates till who come out again at losing time. It were a touching sight, I can tell you, and fetched tears to money Ian. There were no keeping little lass at home. Summer and winter, wet and fine, morning and night, it were all the same. Who'd try to by her mother's side, backwards and forwards, lurking about yard, till who'd done her work. Sometimes who'd pick up our pennies off folks as passed her, or who'd chase cotton fly as it flew through windows, or who'd sit on lodge banks gathering posies. But who were always at gates at losing time, ready to tack a mother's hand, and if it were wet, snuggle under her shawl by her side. There were as blamed th' woman and said as how who ought to keep little in her home, but it were no use, who wouldn't stop her home. The truth were, it were either th' asylum or the factory yard, and the mother's love for the child made her keep her with her, at her side. I've many a time watched 'em come down street together, the mother patting little curly head at parting and kissing little upturned face. Then in a bit who put her head through window of the room who were working in to say somewhat kindly to the child, as who was standing outside, and little un would say, "They'll not be long, mother," and the mother would tell us it would soon be losing time, and how who mun like about a bit longer, and then who would be down where to go home. Then the child like would seem more content and walk round the yard till time come for thorns to leave their work. You never heard her murmur, and you never seed her cry. It were more like a saint nor a lass. Patience on a monument, as they say, and folk were so taken with her that they gave the name of Waitin Nellie. But one day who waited and naught come, for her as who waited for went out by another door, and feet foremost and all. "What?" I said. "Was her mother killed in the mill?" "Yea, it were done with flywheel yon about 10 minutes afore breakfast hour. I was standing where I'm sitting now, when a segment flew, and lifted roof with it, crossing yard and smashing through stonework on thin side at factory, where it lighted on a frame, carrying it and them who were working at it down into the floor below, and the little lass's mother were one on 'em. That's 2 years since, but you can't get child to believe but what a mother is still inside mill. All through the day as th' accident happened, who stuck by th' lodge gate, and when they telled her as the one who waited for were deed, who nobbut shook her head and pointed up to th' broken window at room where her mother used to work, and when night comes they to carry her home skriking and tearing with all passion that belongs to them as is knowing right. That night when all were quiet in th' house, the little lass get up and dressed herself and stole off to th' factory yard. The mechanics were agate with breakdown, passing in and out through th' lodge door with their tackle, but somehow or other the child managed to slip in without being seen, and fun away into th' room where her mother used to work. I was standing near one of the frames and trying to get some strapping loose, as had been tangled in smash. There were a deal hammering going on, and the men were known so quiet in their talk. All at once I heard a cry. "What's that?" I said to the mechanic. "What's what?" he asked. "Hast thou stuck out lately, Harry?" "Nay," I says, "I've had something else to do nor sup today." Just then heard it again, and the mechanic heard it and all. It seemed to come through darkness at back at frames, and it were a child's voice. "Harry," says the mechanic, "I'm off, there's summat knowing right about yon," and he down with his hammer and left me. I were always a chap with a steady nerve, but it was in my mind to run and all. Then I says to myself, "Nay, Harry, There's no one a white plucked, surely. So I stood where I were and swore if I heard voice again I'd follow shush out. I'd no one so long to wait neither. This time it were louder, and I could mak out what it were asking for. Mother, where art thou? It said, and when I lifted my lids I see little lass as you've been speaking to this morning, searching for her as were a corpse. When who seen my light, like as who come to warn me, and when who fun out who it were, who asked me if I'd seen her mother. What could a felly say? For sure I'd seen her that morning as we dragged her out from under the frame, seen her as I ne'er wish to see anybody again, either in this world or any other. But then I couldn't tell child so. Come along with me, I says, and I took her by th' hand. Nay, who sobbed, I won't leave back my mother, and who started looking round as though he was somewhere near. Who's no one here, lass, I said, so come along with me. But I seed her coming this morning, and who mun be here yet, for who's no one a home. Well, thinks I, I'll humour thee a bit. So we started walking round in darkness, the only light being lantern held in me hand. Said Harry, who's there? Said the little un, and who pointed to where the floor were broken away, and the frames had gone through, and her mother with 'em. I've been in some tight corners in my life, but never in one tighter I were in that neat, what with darkness and smash and the gaping floor, and the child talking to her mother as were deed. It were well in mourner I could stand. Then the little lass started pooing me to where who said who seed her mother, and just in middle at struggle, my light went out. Lord have mercy on us, I said, for I knew if lass geet me too near Thoyle, it were death for both on us. How who pooed. If I'd let go her hand, who'd have rushed on to destruction, and if I kept hold on her hand, I felt I should go and all, for who'd the strength o' horse. It were a feat for life, I can tell you, and me holding on like grim death, on her pulling like a locomotor. It were what who seed and what who said as took the nerve out of me. I can face an engine when it runs away, and I'm no particular about a factory fire, but when there's summat near you as you can neither see nor feel, summat that's neither flesh nor blood, and naught else that belongs to this world, the gumption goes, and mine went on that neat, and all I can tell you. In a bit, the mechanic turned up with 2-3 more bringing leaks with 'em. There's no light leap for giving a chap nerve, and when I caught shine of their lanterns, thou strength come back to me, and I dragged child away from Thoyle. Why, that's getting the little lass with thee, I see, he says. What is who doing here at this time of night? Then I told him we were looking for a mother, and I seed him turn his head away and draw his hand across his ear. Well, there's not much more to tell. They never let child seek mother, for to speak the truth, there were naught to see who were fit for e'en like hers. Happen that's the reason that they can't get her to believe her mother's dead, who thinks who's still in mill, and wonders how it is who's so long afore who comes out. As you see, who waits for her, and looks up in every face, expecting it to be the one who misses. Then the child is waiting yonder for her mother's return, waiting for one whose only return will be when the grave gives up its dead. Yea, that's putting it in fine language, but it's God's truth for all that. But surely, I continue, there is someone to take care of her, and see that she is not starved and sodden with wind and rain as she is at present. And I again looked through the factory door to where she stood, drenched in the yard beyond. The lass is no one back, friends, and they've done all they can for her, but they can't get her away from factory gates. Who's never reap but when who's there, who'll settle nowhere else. They sent her to workhouse, but who pined her way to a skeleton, and no more than once when out chance to get away from thimber-seals, and were fun where you see her stunning now. Then her grandmother, as lives over at moors, took her to live with her. But the child fun away up moss, and the scars as though it were drawn by instinct to where her mother used to work. Who come in all weathers, frozen with snow or sopping with rain, and waited yonder as who's waiting now. Then one at Maister's wife took pity on her, and who pays for her keep and lodging at Old Mary's, and lives next door to where Charles' mother lived afore who were killed. And now, who seems more restful and content like, but they can't get away from factory gates. There who waits, asking everybody if they've seen aught of her mother, and how it is her mother willna come home, and there who will wait till her mother comes to fetch her. Till her mother comes to fetch her? I asked in a tone of surprise. I thought you said her mother was dead. And you never heard it dead coming back for living, who's no one forgotten her little un? Death no one puts out love, who's no one so far off and he'll come back for her, and no one so long first neither. It was one of old Harry's prophetic utterances, and the meeting came sooner even than he anticipated. It was a mild sunny morning with neither bite in the wind nor cloud in the sky. Winter, wearied with its months of storm, was resting in its northern home, and little flowers, emboldened by its retreat, lifted their bashful heads amid the freshening green, and nodded to each other in the gentle breeze. The moors no longer wore their wreaths of mist, and in the scattered meadows the cattle were loosed, sportive in their late-gained freedom. Even the grey monotony of manufacture was yielding to the spell of nature's springtide touch, and the horrible wen, the blot of the blackened village, reflected the light and glory of the scene. As I stepped from my lodgings, buoyant with the quickened pulse beat of the season, and aglow with its returning life, I forgot the monotonous months of the past, and entered with rapture into the spirit of the morning. Sorrow and sighing seemed to have passed away, while a great hand, unseen but felt, was, with gentlest touch, wiping away the tears from all eyes. Before I had gone far, however, a woman hurried after me, with a message that discovered how shadows darken the brightest hours, and how even springtide, which is the world's great resurrection, cannot stay the sweep of the hand of death. "Nellie's deeing, poor lass. Wilt I come and mak a prayer o'er her?" "Nellie?" I said. "Who's Nellie?" "Waitin Nellie, thou knows her as stands against factory gates, waiting for her mother, as is deed. We could like you to come and mak a prayer o'er her, just to give her a bit of a lift, poor lass, wi' her deeing." Responding to her rude request, I followed, entering the cottage to find the girl near a darker portal than ever the gloomy gates of the factory yard. She was stretched on a bed that stood in a recess between the chimney jamb and a little window that looked out on the gloomy shadow of the adjoining mill. By her side was the wife of the master, whose interest in her had been so keen, while a knot of neighbours, their eyes red, their aprons pressed to their lips, ever the mute signs of mourning among the working classes, stood silent near the door. As I looked at the dying child, I once more traced the sharp lines of suffering of her whom I had met at the factory gate. It was the old face, radiant with a transformation that told how the days of her waiting were ended. The look of hunger was gone, and in its stead a gleam of gladness played like the reflection of light from another world. The lips moved, but silently. Words unheard by the watchers were being spoken to one whom the watchers could not see. Then the little lean hand was stretched above the coverlet, stretched eagerly and joyously, as though to give a welcome grasp to some man long expected, yet long withheld. A moment more, and the eyes closed, and the gladness of a great satisfaction fell with the calm of death. "Her mother's fotched her at last," said one of the rough-spoken women. "Yai, who's done wi' her Waitin now," remarked another. Then the master's wife, in a voice of gentler accent, though no whit less sincere, said, "He has swallowed up death in victory, and wiped away the tears from all faces. Lo, this is our God. We have waited for him. This is the Lord. We have waited for him. We will rejoice and be glad in his salvation."